This is the thing, it looks like I'm being ignorant and I'm not paying attention to what I've moved up one so you can see me because my wife has complained you can't see me. Just so it makes you know.
We've sent out a search party for Mr.
No one
Hammond.
knows where I am. Huddersfield's women, if they want to improve, we've had a chat off air, so I'm finishing a conversation that we've had, which was very interesting about keeping Magic Weekend and stuff. But if Huddersfield women want to improve, maybe the best thing for them is not have their best signing be taken away by one of the other top teams in Super League. But don't want to say anything controversial.
I think you just did.
Was that us?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, I'm in Saints.
Oh, saying,
Yeah.
Shona.
When Shona Hoyle went
Shona.
there for played about a game and
Yeah. I mean, one player doesn't win everything.
Well, no.
Well, that's
Well,
another
they did-
reason
I don't wanna
why the women's game needs to be professionalised, because then you can get those contracts and it's watertight, and you don't have that poaching of players and all the flux that can go on.
So we won't mention French players coming in.
They actually lived at my house for 4 weeks, so
Did you enjoy the experience?
yeah, it was good actually. Very cultural. I learned some French. Bonjour.
What's that?
Oh, you're fair.
Canard.
Oui. No. The French, of course. Oh, how serendipitous. Because without them, Professor Tony, there probably would not be a World Cup.
Well, they were the people who came up with the original idea for a World Cup in 1934, originally, because the thing to remember is that the Football World Cup only began in 1930, and that was the first one, and the French played a big role in the Football World Cup anyway. But within 6 or 7 months of the game being established in France, they were already suggesting that it should be a World Cup. And there was an attempt to have one in 1937 when the Kangaroos came over, but it never worked out. And then it was the French who again took the initiative in 1947 and proposed having one, and then hosted the first one. So yeah, without the French, we'd have been waiting for a long time for a World Cup. And you know, the French have always been the most expansionist nation in terms of trying to get the game established in other countries. Like when the game was played in Yugoslavia in the 1950s, it was all down to the French. So yeah, the French are the true expansionists of rugby league.
I know the international game is... What would be the fair word to use, Phil? I don't want to say a mess, because I know there's lots of...
Dormant.
There's lots of people, well, especially in Australia. I know lots of people work very hard, especially at the smaller nations, to get things going and keep things going. We had the Middle East and African Championships at the weekend, won by Nigeria. So there's lots of people doing lots of good things around the world of rugby league. Probably not backed up by those at the top end, perhaps. Well, how many games has Sean Wayne coached against actual real nations so far?
A handful.
It's not his fault. Don't blame him for anything. But how important has the World Cup been, and can it be going forward after this tournament?
Oh, it's massive. I think if you are serious about promoting yourself on the widest possible stage and attracting new fans, international dimension to your competition is everything. And again, I'd use the Women's Euros, which I think is going to be a motivational factor for England's women going into this World Cup. That it started off with a big event at Old Trafford, and the ticket sales for those games afterwards weren't particularly high, but you got imbued with the spirit of, I need to watch this, I need to, even if it's Holland against Switzerland, something's going on that I want to be a part of, and I think it took on a life of its own, and only international sport can do that. And that's why I think the opportunities post-World Cup are enormous. I think if we're realistic, and people better than me can talk about the chances of the respective teams, but I think if we're honest, only one of the 3 England teams has a chance of winning a tournament. But the actual fact that this is going to be the biggest sporting event going on in this country for 5 weeks is massive for rugby league. The opening game is going to be an event on 2 fronts. One is St James's Park is going to look great because no matter what the ticket sales are at the moment, there is going to be close on 50,000 people there. And obviously now that the Kaiser Chiefs are playing, that's guaranteed a sellout. I think the fact that it's England and Samoa, where again you've got a game where there's a huge narrative around it, that you want England as the host nation to be taking all the focus. But this Samoan team is now a far more difficult prospect than it would have been when the draw was made at Buckingham Palace, and you're looking at
Well, Prince Harry was he still a member of the royal family? Or he was just leaving, wasn't he?
Well, rugby league was very nearly establishment then, but like we no longer are. But I think, again, that Samoan team, when people see, 8 players who've just played in the NRL Grand Final, and you're going, I want to see that. That's going to be a really competitive game. I think that gives the tournament a huge kickstart. And we shouldn't get too fixated about the result either. It'd be great if England won, but they will get out of the group, and it'll determine who they play in the quarterfinals. Might be a tougher route if they don't win, but it's not a be-all and end-all 80 minutes. It's more a celebration. That night then goes straight into Australia playing Fiji at Headingley, which again, we haven't seen the Australians for far too long over here. You look at their team with 13 debutants in, and we're already salivating, going, we haven't seen these players. Last time we saw them, it was, Cameron Smith and Cooper Cronk and Billy Slater, and they've all gone, so let's see who's going to replace them. And they're playing Fiji, who they've played in the last 3 semi-finals in the World Cup. That one day alone is so enticing, I think, for the sport, and it's on BBC One. And I don't think we should underestimate how many of the games are on free-to-air television, like all of them, but on the main channels. So the women's game is going to be partly on BBC One, partly on BBC Two, wheelchair partly on BBC Two, partly on BBC Three in the red button. I just think it's so important for the sport that this World Cup is a success, and that we then go into another one in 2025. We now know that's happening in France. And I think there's a lot of logic between what happens here will transfer into the logistics of how that French tournament looks. We need to announce 2029 sooner rather than later. I don't know if the professor's got any inside track on when that kind of decision might be made. He moves in those circles, I don't. But again, I think we need to pin everything around a World Cup, and you look at other sports and their international competitions, and it is how we are going to get traction. It's not going to be how many rounds of domestic competition we play.
So there's extra incentive to go play in 2025 times, because you'll be able to speak the language over there.
And somewhere to stay.
Yeah.
One of the great things about this current World Cup coming up, Johnny Hannah's turned up.
Hey!
Come sit down, let me move up.
It's here for the second half.
You said you say.
You've got a lot of making up to do. You're answering every question.
Yeah. Cheers. I'm Elliot.
It was Catterick, North Yorkshire.
All right. Well, I've just been around Catterick village, which is very nice.
Did you see the Gurkha restaurant?
No, I didn't.
I've never seen a Gurkha restaurant before.
What do they taste like?
It's the next chief executive of the Rugby Football League, Phil Catton. Want to edit that one out? No. So I was about to say, the most exciting thing about this World Cup build-up, to me, has been the fact that there is an argument over who should be in the England women's squad.
I knew this was coming.
Well, you don't have to answer it, but it must be good that there is an actual spotlight on who is in and who is not in the squad, because I can't understand why Sinead Peach is not in, but I know nothing as we discussed.
No, I have to agree. I don't know why Sinead's not. She's been at the forefront of... She's been one of our best players all year long, and I think other players have been brought in this year, like within this season, and been put into that World Cup squad. She could have been brought in at the start of the season and been in that, and should be in that World Cup squad. I like Sinead's one of my best friends, and I think she deserves it, and the amount of hard work she puts in on and off the field is second to none.
I don't think that's a controversial opinion, so I think you're all right. It's good that we are discussing who should be in and who should be not, and it's a sign of where women's rugby league is coming, because I guess we would have had this discussion 5 years ago.
No, we wouldn't, no. But I think, obviously, Craig, the head coach, will make his decisions based on who he thinks will go out there and perform the best. So, although we all have opinions on who we think should be in and out of that squad, he obviously has the best idea.
Brazil. Did you ever think England would be playing a match against Brazil in the Rugby League World Cup?
Didn't anyone?
It's a ridiculous fiction, and this is where the coach is going to earn his corn, because what do we know about them? Absolutely
Nothing.
nothing.
But then a lot of the women's teams, obviously the girls have played France quite a few times in the past few years. Australia, obviously, there's a lot of the NRLW online that you can look at. But a lot of the other teams, like obviously, I actually played in both of the P&G games back in 2017. But a lot of the other teams, there's not a lot of clue about any of them, really, apart from, obviously, a few of them played in the last World Cup, which was quite a while ago now, so there's not much to go on.
What was that experience like in Papua New Guinea?
Oh, it was crazy. We came off the plane and there's like people like barged up against this like fence, and I was like, oh my god. And we got on this bus and I was like, oh yeah, sit down, bullet shot, just in the middle of the windscreen. But it was a great experience. They love rugby league out there. There was like 7,000 people watching this game that we played in Garoka, I think it was called, and they were all just literally piled up against this fence. I'm surprised the fence didn't actually fall down, like with the amount of people that they wanted your socks, they wanted your t-shirts. We were even just like walking down the street and we had like a football, and they wanted the ball off us. And we were like, grabbing at your t-shirt. Can I have your t-shirt? I can't take the t-shirt off, unfortunately.
There are all these socks on the Papua New Guinean version of eBay now with Sandberg's shirts.
The funniest thing was, none of them had shoes, but they all had phones.
Really?
Yeah. We're like, can I take a photo of you? Do you want my shoes while you're at it?
Phones are far more important.
Yeah, in this day and age, I think they are.
The thing that always amuses me is international coaches, or any coaches, Stevie, they will say, I pick on form. And I'm going to pick on you now because, and it's not your fault, you were in a number of England squads when you were out injured, which seems completely a bizarre thing to happen. What was it like being picked when you know you had no chance of playing?
You just know you can do a job. You just know you can compete, and you've got the mentality to compete, and that you can raise to that level. I think at Leeds, you know, we had players that had thrown themselves into tackles time and time again. You know, Brett Delaney, Jamie Jones Buchanan, Carl Ablett, myself, you know, and when you get to those playoffs, it doesn't matter who's in form or not. It's like, oh no, you know the level, you know the level to play. So, you know, it's not fully indicative of that. You know, form does come into it, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if trust is a big thing as well. You know, Sean Wayne will trust a lot of those players and understand that they can show up and turn up for him, and they're tough enough to do it. You know, if it blends in with his style of play and the type of sort of game he wants to play. So yeah, form, as we know, form can change as well. You know, it can be good before coming into a final and a playoffs or a World Cup, but it can be crap when it starts. Do you know? So it's where do you deal your hand and what do you rely on? I guess. You know, there's the England football that are doing not so great at the minute, but you know, there's many times where as an international team they've done really poorly and then performed well, but then they've also done really well as a team and done poorly. You know, so it's like it's hard, isn't it? It's hard.
I think a lot of it is based on experience as well. A lot of players who are probably on form, especially younger players, obviously, especially in the women's game, a lot of the players, like you have your, obviously, Amy's, Jodie, Rudgie, Tara, are all at that topper end for who have been playing for a while. They have a lot of experience, and although some people may have opinions on how on form those individuals have been, like Amy, etc., have been on very good form this year, but some may say others haven't, but they have experience in those situations. And putting a player who has been on form in the Super League all year, then putting them in camp for 3 weeks, without the family around them, without the support network that they usually have, to then put them on an international stage, they might not actually perform as well as they have been doing all year. So I think coaches have to actually look at experience, how people are going to actually perform in camp as well, because that's a big thing. Like, you're spending like a lot of time with these people, and the group of people also have to get on, otherwise it's not going to work.
Plenty of historical cases of squads not getting on at international level.
Mainly when half of them were from Leeds and half were from St.
As Jimmy told us the other week. There's, I think the case I can think of in sport comes in football with Jimmy Greaves missing out on the World Cup final in 1966 and how that affected him, because of course he wanted his teammates to win, he wanted England to win, but he wasn't part of that. When you are part of a team and you're on the sidelines for big games, Stevie, how does that feel? Obviously you want the team to win, but how do you feel in yourself at that point?
I mean, I feel all over the place because I'm not involved in this World Cup, do you know what I mean? It's like I'm having to find another relationship back to the game because I've retired, I've been injured and I've had headaches every day, and partly because of the game, you know, so I'm having to, you know, these conversations are great for me because it gives me another touch point back to the game, back to the World Cup. But yeah, when you're not playing, it's a mixture. You know, I had that episode in 2015 in League Leaders game where I was sat on a physio bed looking at my knee that looked like an inflatable knee, and we'll lose. I think we're drawing against Huddersfield, and that means we're going to finish 4th or 5th or wherever, which meant we weren't going to do the treble because we weren't going to get the second trophy. It meant we were going to get a much worse bonus.
That's the most important.
That's another,
I can imagine that.
that's another thing.
Imagine a bonus for a second.
I can put up with the pain as long as I get the bonus.
Yeah. But then I'm thinking, what the hell what is this now? I'm like, what have I done here now? And I'm not going to be a part of this treble, you know, the last game, you know, we're talking the last game, which means everything. So you go into that and you've got so many emotions. You got emotions. I had emotions as a Leeds Rhinos fan, Leeds Rhinos supporter, growing up all that time. A Leeds Rhinos young sort of player, where I'm watching all these legends of the game that I played with and teammates with now, but they're finishing off their sort of last ever game, but then you're also not a part of it, and you feel your self-esteem's lower because you're not doing it. You know, you literally just don't feel as good about yourself, and you can walk around the stadium and cheer it, but have you done it? I don't know. Have you done it really? It's like it's a mixture. You know, I don't feel one thing. I feel many different things. I think that's, you know, I guess that's a lot of life.
Can I just ask something? Do you get support for that? No, you don't. There's a short answer. I know there's a welfare manager now, and which, to be fair, you know, Niles Johnson at Leeds, it's revolutionised, you know, alongside our culture that's more open, speaking about mental health and the ups and downs and self-esteem and what's winning, what's losing. You know, we have a conversation around it, so we're a lot more open, and there's more support there. But back then, it was like, you know, it's just like do your best. You know, it's just. And I guess that's why we need people speaking about the other sides of it, you know, and understanding those parts of it as well.
Because the first thing I should have asked you when we started, whenever we turned up here, was how are you? I mean, you obviously had to retire because of the effects of concussions, which is a big talking point in all sports these days.
Yeah.
How are you at the minute?
I'm all right. Yeah, I'm all right. Like, you know, that's what you're saying it up here. Is I'm all right. Yeah, I'm all right. But yeah, I'm good. Some days I'm shocking. Some days I'm really good and I'm positive. You know. And then with the concussion, you know, trying to go in between feeling the headaches and disregarding the headaches, you know, it's like, it's just a bit of a balancing act with that. And then the dizziness and stuff, and just dealing with stuff that I can't do that I used to do a lot of the time. And then obviously, you know, just doing, you know, what we love doing, what we watched, and being a part of a team and testing yourself to the limit, which I probably did too much. But it's part of who I am, you know, so it's like finding, so that's, you know, why these conversations are great, and,
you know, I'm hopefully next week going to be doing a roundtable talking about concussion, which I hope that will be an open conversation between players where we can say what we think, you know, and what we feel and why it's such a complex matter at the minute.
It's strange because it almost sounds, I mean, this will sound stupid, but that's almost the hardest question to ask them. Because I don't know if you want to answer that question. I can ask you, what's it like winning the grand final? What's it like doing this? Because that's easy for me to ask, because, you know, it's all positive thoughts, and all in my mind, it's positive winning something. But asking someone how they are, who's retired because of the effects of what they've done on the field, it's, do I want to answer this? Do I want to know the answer?
But I think it's good to ask that, because I think in life and society now, everything's so absolute. You know, when you say, how did you feel winning grand final? After the game, I was so anxious, I didn't know what to do. I was so anxious. I was just like, I was so high. I didn't know where to go. I was so high, I didn't know when I was going to come down and what that was going to look like. So, but then there was a flavour of euphoria. So it's like, I think if you know, asking the questions is better than not asking them, because we just get presented something that's not the truth. Do you know what I mean? And you can get lost in an illusion that winning a World Cup or a grand final is going to make everything absolutely amazing for the rest of your life.
Because now there's no ignorance over head injuries or whatever. Do you ever worry going out on the field what potential damage you can do to yourself?
Yeah, I think obviously everyone, when you're out there, you don't think about getting your head knocked until obviously it actually happens, and you're like, oh, but you don't think about it a lot. I don't think I particularly think about it a lot, but obviously with things being more like research now, obviously it is a bit scary to think that stuff like that can happen like in the future, or it could like end your career. But I don't think I think people just love it so much that they don't. And I probably think that you wouldn't take back everything that you did to.
No, I mean,
and that's someone who,
and I think mine's you know, it's a rarer case. You know what I mean? It's like I speak to people. Obviously, I have different conversations with people because I'm like a big flipping, you know, alarm bell for people. But people who've experienced stuff similar will talk to me, and I have a different picture. But yeah, you know, there is a balance to find in amongst everything, and you know, weighing up the positives and negatives and stuff. But yeah, it's complex. But for a long time, I look back now and I sort of think about the experience that I've had with my head and how I felt and stuff, and I was like, oh, was that feeling like that after that 50 tackle game that I did? Was that concussion, or was that, do you know? And you sort of have those, you know, memories and stuff that comes up, but you know, it's taken a big sort of injury to put me out.
Because now we've got this World Cup coming up, we've just had players miss grand finals, big semi-finals through head injuries. There's the big case in the NFL with the Miami Dolphins played the other week. Someone might miss this World Cup final because of a head injury, and I don't know. It's going to be a difficult decision that's going to be made, but it has to be made.
Yes, I think we sort of come on in leaps and bounds actually as a game. I think you'd agree, Stevie. When you look back to certainly when I was growing up, and I think us too as well, and not so much you're a bit younger. Back in
just doesn't look it, but yeah.
Back in the 70s, you were sort of taught whatever sport you were playing, never to show pain or that you were hurt. Playing cricket, for example, if the ball hit you, the very last thing you should be doing is letting the baller know that you were in a bit of trouble there. And probably it's still the same on the field. If you're getting hurt, you can't let the opposition see that. But I think that aspect of when you come off the field and get back into the dressing rooms, things have changed. I mean, I had the real luxury of spending a year with Batley in 2016, where I just went everywhere with them to write a book about that club and the town itself. So I got a real first-hand view of what it's like behind the scenes for the likes of these two. You know, when you're going back in the dressing room at half-time, I was there with them, and the coach is into you, and everybody's got their own little rituals and everything. And the most noticeable thing is that everybody's in their own little world, and you're not really going to get through into that. You know, everybody seems to be in their own headspace. But it is quite an awesome thing when you watch professional and semi-professional sports people, and they have to sort of come out of that and then get back on the field. It's an unnatural thing in a way. I mean, they are gladiators, that's what they are. So all the psychological stuff that goes along with that, it's not straightforward. It's tough because it is a tough sport, isn't it?
Yeah.
Probably no tougher. Maybe boxing might be on a par, but very, very little else.
Book's still available. it
Book's
must
still
be said.
available.
We should have
All
brought
the
one,
books
shouldn't we?
are-
and put it on the
And
table there.
only 5 minutes before you
Yeah,
mentioned it.
you know, the call on someone missing a World Cup final, that's a big call, isn't it?
Because obviously,
Who wants to make that call?
Well,
went
it's
to-
interesting.
But it shouldn't be part. I mean, I think that's the thing. But the one with the same dilemma over just a routine, if there is such a thing, league match. And I think that's the point about the governing body has to impose the standards, and that they are imposed whatever the circumstances, because it's rugby league, and if people can find a way around the rules, they're going to find a way around the rules. Because that's how we were born, really, when trying to get around amateur rules in rugby union. And, trying to
But
circumvent
also,
the rules.
nobody wants to lose the place in the side. Nobody wants to let the teammates down.
Yeah.
There's all that sort of thing.
So it has to be an independent decision, regardless of the level of the match. Otherwise, the whole thing will fall apart.
Although interestingly, there are two different protocols. You know, over here, if you have a concussion, it's an 11-day stand down,
Yeah,
you miss the
yeah.
next game.
Is that
The NRL it isn't. You can play a week later, depending if you pass some pretty stringent tests.
will everyone be on the same protocol?
Yes. So,
11.
yeah, the IRL have their own protocols for the World Cup, but it's interesting that is something that post-World Cup we may be looking to standardise.
Mm.
And most sports are moving to rugby union's just followed rugby league's ruling, and it's moved to the 11-day stand down. Because obviously, if it's just a 6-day stand down, which it used to be, it means you can play the next match. So, you know,
Yeah.
where's the protection there?
While I remember, let me lob another grenade in at Tansy. Because in Australia, they play 70 minutes. If I come up to any female rugby league player in England and say, right, I think you need to play less minutes because, you know, we need to change the game, I'd be trolled even more than I was before. Is that going to be an advantage at all for England in this World Cup? The fact that they used to play in 70 minutes in the NRL?
Yeah, I think so, because that's an extra 10 minutes of extra fitness. Like, obviously the Aussies are very athletic. Like,
I mean, we need
we're
everyone.
not taking, yeah, I'm not taking that away from them, but like an extra 10 minutes of playing rugby league is pretty tough. No matter how fit you are, it's a different type of fitness. Is match fitness.
That's when
Like you
when
can
it matters
train,
as well.
yeah, you can train all you like, but nothing actually trains you for that unless when you're out there. So I think it probably will give an advantage, but not a marginal one.
It's not an easy game, is
No.
it, really? Do you know, when you think about what you're actually doing on the field, it's not an easy... I remember saying to Kevin Sinfield, I think I was like 19, 2014, I said, this is just a massive flogging, this, isn't it? Before a game. And he went, yeah, it is actually, isn't it? Just like, you know, you just fear, those training sessions, you fear. You're like, you're just like fearing it to death, like going outside and
Oh,
running
the
so
deep
much.
depths of winter when
Oh,
it's
and
raining.
it's just like you're running 10 metres back, sprinting 10 metres back, 20
And if you
metres
don't do it
back,
fast enough, you have to
30
do more.
down on your front, up. And I'm like thinking, that's what it's a game, that's what we're doing in a game though. But that's the, you know, stuff that's put on top of each other, and because of the competition, it makes it what it is, you know, the hard flipping test that it is.
The 50-30 in Australia as well.
Yeah.
They've got their own rules.
And I swear, don't they play with a smaller ball as well?
Yeah.
Also, oh, we've got
Yeah.
loads around Manchester.
Size
This
four
is
ball.
great.
A size 4 ball, yeah.
So they won't be used to the size of the ball. We need to
It'll be
make sure-
raining. We're not used to that.
Make sure the kicks on 50
It's
30.
It'll
It'll
be
be
Get the ball.
raining, that's the biggest one.
Oh, well, now I'm turning my mind. England's going to win the Women's World Cup. We've all got the old advantages for us. This is going to be the biggest Women's World Cup ever, Tony, and that's a great thing. Isn't it? The TV coverage, the media coverage, the teams coming over. It's the biggest showcase for the women's game there's ever been.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
by a long way.
Oh, I forget, there's two.
There's
Sorry,
two
Go on,
turns.
Tom,
Oh.
you go first. Yeah.
Well, I'll say, yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
Phil.
Well, I think one of the things, you know, I think we've all been posted about this, just to insert a sort of negative historical note, is that this has been a long time coming as well, because in 2000, at the same time as the Men's World Cup in 2000, there was what's called the Women's World Series, between Great Britain and Australia and New Zealand. And it sort of set the stage, and there were World Cups, and then there was a break. And it's another example, and you can imagine, if it had been developed as it should have been in the early 2000s, would have now been at an even more advanced stage with the Women's World Cup. And it's kind of, you look back in the history of the women's, and it's the same with the domestic game as well. It's the women's game in the 2000s is yet another example of rugby league's ability never to miss an opportunity, Because if it had carried on the way, you know, that initial burst of enthusiasm and organisation 20 odd years ago, then, you know, Tamsin could have been a household name by now. But, you know, we are rugby league, and we need to be aware of the fact that when an opportunity comes along, you've got to grab it and develop it and run with it.
The interesting thing is that the NRLW Grand Final, which was a precursor to the men's, had over 40,000 people watching it. They got there early because they wanted to see the Women's Grand Final. We already know that there is a record crowd for a Northern Hemisphere game going to the opening doubleheader at Headingley on the 1st of November. There's over 10,000 tickets have been sold. If you can't build on that, purely from a commercial point of view, never mind a playing point of view, then you're clearly not doing your job properly. And the fact that that doubleheader at Headingley starts in an afternoon is really interesting, because not everybody will be off work in an afternoon. It does give you the opportunity to do loads of offers to schools, which I think has been a high take-up of. It's England against Brazil, which, with the greatest will in the world, shouldn't be competitive. I don't think that detracts from the occasion. The fact of seeing a nation like Brazil, a continent like South America, running out in a World Cup is huge for rugby league. Never happened before. Similar with Jamaica in the men's. But you also get then PNG against the Canadian Ravens afterwards. So we're talking about events, occasions, and how you, goes back to the RMG discussion in the first half about what does the sport need. Well, you've got all the elements of traditional rugby league, but you've also got something that if you weren't perhaps an avid fan, you might say, I'll invest in that afternoon, because if 10,000 other people are going, and there's going to be you know, those Brazilian colours playing in a World Cup that mean so much in another sporting sense, I want to be there and see it. So we would be foolish in this sense not to, you know, build on that opportunity.
And not too far down the road in York, where we will be on the afternoon of the game, Australia-New Zealand, which that's going to be a great game on York's doorstep, and a great opportunity again to sell the game to future York City Knights ladies players, potentially, not just fans.
Yeah, 100%. Yes. Yeah.
A potential World Cup final as well. I mean, hopefully it's not. But
We'll see.
We've got to talk about the Wheelchair World Cup as well, because England and France are the joint favourites. Fellow England and
Yeah. Having seen the intensity of the Wheelchair Grand Final at first hand on Saturday, and realising that a bulk of the players that were on that pitch will be now amalgamating and playing for England. Yes, and I think there's two things about Wheelchair. One is you really should experience it live. For all those who've watched it on television, it's a great experience. It fits the camera perfectly in the same sort of way that snooker does. But unless you're there and you can feel the vibrations of the hits, and you can hear metal on metal, and you can see people getting thrown out of their chairs and play carrying on, and I mean, everybody who plays it has a story. And one of the things IMG were talking about was building narratives. It's already there. These are superstars in the making that not enough people know about. But if you look at the work that England have done since the last World Cup final, which they still feel aggrieved about. They probably won't say it publicly, but they felt they were robbed in Perpignan in 2017. You can watch it on YouTube, make up your own mind, but there was a feeling that there may have been some home officials that perhaps didn't allow some things to happen at the end of the game that possibly meant England were denied the opportunity. It rankles with some of those that will still be playing. But you can see the progression over the last couple of test series we've had, that we've beaten France, we've put some doubt in their mind. Clearly, they have some exceptional players. Most of them will come from one club who've dominated over there. We now have players from 4 or 5 clubs who are going to make a contribution and have been together a long time. Yes, we'll beat them in the final at Manchester.
And Tom Coyne sorted his hair out as well. And I know I'm, you know, people who are here will see disgraceful hair, but he's looking better. He looks really statesman-like on the
What a
telly.
suit. What a suit.
What a suit with the badge on. Tony, what are you looking forward to most about the Rugby League World Cup coming up in this country as part of the Rugby League World Cup Cultural Festival?
Well, the opening night in Newcastle, I think it's going to be pretty special. Brought a bit of a background in that as well, sort of being very keen back in the days when Gateshead Thunder first kicked off up in the northeast. People like Mick Hogan getting the academy side of things going and bringing it through from the youth rugby and everything. It's really good to see how far it's come up there now, rugby league, and it's just growing and growing all the time with like clubs in Peterlee and places like that. So I think it's a real sort of reward to the northeast really, to have an event of that magnitude there. And it's really important that it does kick off well. And you've sort of got a few doubts about the actual, maybe can England win that game? Well, they should win that game, but then again you look at the Samoa team and maybe they shouldn't necessarily. So there is jeopardy in it, but you know, the best games have got jeopardy in them, and when you win them, they're all that more satisfying. So it's got real potential, that match, to kick it all off with a massive bang, and then, as we've seen in previous World Cups, things tend to roll on from that.
It's going to be a fascinating night in Newcastle.
I think if you're talking about more generally, what are we looking forward to the most? I think it goes beyond players. Clearly there are some that we definitely want to see. I want to see Jerome Luai close up because we've watched him for the last 2 or 3 years and he's a character. But what I love more than anything is the idea that we are genuinely spreading the sport with this World Cup, that we are seeing a team from Brazil, we are seeing a team from Jamaica, we are seeing again a team from Lebanon, which when you think about how they could even get a team together and have a sport, it may not prosper, but it's got sufficient foundations there to be something. When you look at, even in the wheelchair, we're going to see the debut of the USA. Now, the USA could be anything in sport, but again, if the USA latches on to one of its teams is in a World Cup and might do something, I don't think they're one of the few teams that haven't announced their squad yet, but the word coming back from there is they're going to have a lot of veterans in their team. So again, if you're linking to that military background, they may not have the nuances of how the game is played, but what there will be is they'll be fit and they'll be competitive. And the fact that the first wheelchair game is England against Australia, and there isn't really an Ashes history, but the people that go to the Copper Box, and again, they're talking about record attendance for a wheelchair game, for that, will be able to get into that Ashes spirit. I just think it's all those stories that excite more than individuals playing for nations, and that's why I think we do have a huge opportunity.
Tamsin, what are you looking forward to?
All of it.
which is the perfect answer.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything in particular. I think it's going to be a great spectacle. Every game is probably going to be interesting, and that's a good thing about it. And there's lots of things to look forward to.
Well, we've got Brazil, we've got Spain in the wheelchair as well, haven't we? There's a spread of nations who are not
Nearly had
traditional.
Norway.
Nearly had Norway, yeah. Ireland have had to step into their shoes, unfortunately, but he's really exciting. Steve, what are you looking forward to the most?
I don't know. Just as Phil was talking, I think it's about the Samoa game. I think that's going to be a big game. Just to be proud of rugby league, to have that event on and to have such an atmosphere, and I think it's going to be competitive and hopefully we win. But I don't think that has to be the main factor. I think it's just got to be a good spectacle. I think that's going to be great, and I'm interested to see the messages that come from it. I know Kev's doing that 27 marathons in 27 hours.
Why does he do that?
Because he can. Because he can, I think. But I think these messages that can be conveyed through it is something that is going to be exciting to see, and I'm sure that they're behind marketing and behind it, and trying to spread the good word that we do in rugby league, which will be good. And then seeing England in the final would be awesome.
It would.
It'd be awesome.
What do you think? First, Tony, because we're coming towards the end, what are you looking forward to the most about this World Cup?
Well, like Tamsin, all of it. Because I was thinking, I'm old enough to remember when there were just 4 teams. But then when you think, it's only 30 years ago, there's just 5 teams: Papua New Guinea, Britain, Australia, New Zealand and France. So you look at where we come, and it's just, to be honest, as somebody who's supported the game for a long time, it's just mind-blowing to imagine that as a women's team from Brazil played. Yeah, it's just unthinkable, let alone that Jamaica are playing. And also, I think the fact that this is probably the first World Cup where you can't really 100% say who's going to win. And, imagine what it would do for world sport if Samoa or Tonga won. Or potentially Fiji beat Australia in their opening game, which is not beyond the bounds of possibility. So it's for the first time ever, I think we've got a World Cup where pretty much everything is up for grabs and nobody knows exactly what's going to happen, which I think is very different from what's happened in most other games. And I think the final thing, I think the other thing which would be great, is that what it will give rugby league is that in Britain it will give rugby league its step back. There will be a spring in rugby league step because it's going to be a success. Whether if England perform creditably, then that's going to be great. Whether we can win it or not, that's another matter. But who knows who's going to win? But I think the tournament will be a success in its own terms, and it'll give rugby league exposure that it hasn't had for a long time, and it'll be a lot of people who are, rusted on fans who think, oh yeah, I'll go and watch a rugby league game. I want to see it on telly or whatever, and that will give the whole game a sense of confidence. It will restore its sense of pride, which it hasn't had for quite a while, for a whole variety of reasons. Stuff that's gone on in the game, economic conditions. But I think it will give rugby league fans just that extra pride in the game that's necessary to propel it forward. Because if you're not so confident about your own game, why should anybody else take an interest? So I think it's going to be great because of what's going to go on in the field, but also because of the fillip that's going to give to the game and to individual supporters. They'll be proud to say, I'm a rugby league supporter.
So I turn to the audience and say, any questions?
I think, certainly from my point of view, I think the wheelchair ladies for the men's World Cup that is just on our doorstep very soon. I think it's absolutely imperative that the media get behind it, people watch it on the TV, because I think more than anything, it's a sport which is so exciting to watch, whichever version you go and see. We absolutely love it here. And I think the more people that see it on the TV and even go at it, we need the sport to grow. Now, you mentioned in the first half, which wasn't recorded, about the IMG stuff, but as we purely talk about the World Cup, there's nothing better than a World Cup to get a whole nation behind it, and people thinking, oh my word, rugby league is a fantastic sport. You guys have played it. I've watched you both. Brilliant athletes. Wouldn't want to tackle them. Can I just say that? At all.
You're going to have to get out.
Right, we're on. So, but yeah, I think more than anything, it's about getting the nation behind it and getting those new fans, those new supporters, and general interest, because it's the pinnacle of the sport, is the World Cup. So if we can get that in right, be it Newcastle for the first game, or every single game after that, in whatever part, I think it's really important the whole country gets behind it, and then we'll get the more fans, which is what we all want, more interest, more media exposure, which is sadly lacking. Maybe not for this World Cup, but certainly during the Super League season, you look at the papers and you look if you can find a result. Well, that's just rubbish for the exceptional product that this sport is.
I think there's two other issues as well that make it important. One is the double-header finals at Old Trafford. Because I think other sports will look at that in envy and say, this isn't tokenism. There is a genuine reason to put the women and the men on the same stage. And I think if they see rugby league doing that first, because we are good at firsts, sometimes we're not good at following up the first that we've done, I think that's going to have a real impact. And to be honest, it'd be fantastic if England are in both of those finals. But if they're not, if you're waiting for Australia against New Zealand in the women's and you're waiting for Tonga against Australia, New Zealand in the men's, that's something that I think will fill a stadium, but also will keep people absolutely glued. The other thing is the cultural element around each of these nations that I don't think we make enough of. But when you have hackers and sippy towels and prayers and anthems, and you see what it means to the players, You know, you can see Fijian players in tears before a game. You can see New Zealanders so passionate about what it means to put on that shirt. That you only get that in an international dimension. We do that particularly well. And a World Cup showcases it all in a 5-week period. I think that's going to capture the nation's imagination as well. And that's why, again, it's about who wins, but it isn't in some respects. It's about what you stand for as a sport, a bit like what Tony was saying, that, you know, it's who we are. And if we can get that out there, and that message comes across, and you want to see some of these people then play domestically when the new season starts, fantastic.
Any more for any more? Silence, good. Right. That was good. Tony, it was well worth you coming.
Well, I'm surprised. Have we already had the first half?
We're playing the 35 minutes each way. We're
All right.
going on the Australian women.
Are we going to have a third half?
I'll tell you what, he didn't half make a contribution as a substitution in the second half.
Golden points coming up.
Yeah, we-
All your books are in shops now, I'm guessing.
Old books, yes, old books.
Where are you?
And in libraries.
Yeah. All them from libraries, you have to pay for them.
That's right, yeah. That's the beauty of libraries, yeah. Yeah, they should all be, and not just mine, lots of other people's as well.
The Tony Hannon Library.
Including...
But Underdogs, the book about Bally is unbelievable. Unbelievable stuff.
Oh, thank you.
Well, it is believable because it happened.
Yeah. Well, it's just happened again nearly as well this year. I mean, the number of messages I've been getting by people saying, is there a follow-up? You know, I think that like me to catapult myself in at the start. Can't really do that. But Batley's such a great little club. It's like a microcosm of everything that's great about community rugby league. And you just can't go wrong there. There are just stories all the time. So who knows? Might go back one day.
Greg Lingard's hat.
And no shoes.
No. Is he from Garocca? Is he there? The new magazine 4020 is out next week.
Yeah, we're busy doing it at the moment, which is why I was late.
Good answer.
Got to write something about tonight now. So when you read it and you say, a crowd of 1,000 people turn up.
It's not rugby union. I think we should say before he says it himself that we are publishing El Profesore's next book.
Oh, yeah.
Another one.
Look out for that before Christmas. Put it on your list.
What's it called?
Who framed William Webb Ellis?
The greatest myth
And
in
other
world sport.
puzzles, and other puzzles in rugby history. It's a collection of little short pieces about, you know, why is the ball oval, why the two teams in Hull, why there's so many penalties in rugby union. Everything you've ever wanted to know about the games. There's a real answer as well. It's not just prejudice. There's a historical answer there. Yeah. So it's out before Christmas.
Well, good luck with that. And is your podcast still? It's podcast as well still going?
It is, but it's going once a month now rather than once a week. So yeah, that's Rugby Reloaded. So if you want to get your fill of rugby history and other football codes as well, I do a bit of soccer, a bit of rugby union. You can find it at Rugby Reloaded.
Steve, what are you up to?
I'm just talking at the minute. Just going around and talking.
Where did we pick you up from?
Oh yeah, that's what I'm doing. Masters. I'm doing a Masters in Sports Business Management, which, you know, who knows what I'm going to manage after that? Who knows?
The Leeds Rhinos?
Well,
Take over from Gary Headington.
Well,
You can't go forever.
I don't know. I'm doing that, and I'm doing mentality. Still doing mentality, the corporate wellbeing stuff. Got a counselling service for men on there. You know, men that I hope connect to sport and connect to the worth in doing that. Work on your mental health, and then sort of hoping to get into acting actually. It's just a bit of a background ambition. You know, that might happen, it might not, but we'll see.
So you might be popping up the Mount the Wall pack.
It might be, I mean, yeah, maybe. I don't know, yeah, I'm deciding what I'm doing and feeling into it, I guess, at the minute.
And
Yes,
the
JJ,
Papua
for semantics.
New Guinean's got his socks as well.
Yeah, well, there's a trendy socks he's filled with, like ankle socks.
Don't talk to me about trends.
Film some trendy North Leeds. It's the up and coming area.
Yeah,
That's what the Prime Minister says. Tamsin, you've got nothing to promote. You haven't got a podcast, you haven't got a book, you haven't got... No.
No.
Just your season.
She's talking. You can do more of this, you're good at it.
Am I?
Yeah.
We've got a good track record because, you know, I'm only presenting this podcast these days because Matt Wilson's on every TV channel. So, and we don't even talk about Danica Prem. like third choice or whatever. Because Phil don't know how to work the laptop. Is your laptop camera working yet?
Temperamental.
We wish you well though with York next year. You know, I'm going. Do you want me to tip you to win? Because you know this is the problem now. No.
I want you to say we're going to be bottom of the pile.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we talk about rugby league promoting stuff. We've got a flipping room full of whiteboards here.
Oh, we could have just written
We could have
40,
put
20
a new
on.
book on.
Yeah.
New book, couldn't we? Talking.
Yeah, but I turned up and just put the
Your
laptop
masters is
on.
already paying off for sports
I
marketing.
know,
isn't
that's
it?
it, that's it, here we go.
Yeah.
We're feeling into it now.
The people want
Make
to
sure
go
the
home.
whiteboard